Fernando Rodriguez Jr. is the United States District Judge of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. Fernando was born and raised in Harlingen, Texas. He earned his BA from Yale University and his JD, his Juris Doctor, with honors from the University of Texas Hook'em Law School. From 1997 to 1998, he served as a briefing attorney for Associate Justice Nathan Hecht of the Supreme Court of Texas. And then Judge Rodriguez joined the Dallas office of Baker Botts, where he soon became a partner. Later, before becoming a judge, he worked as a field office director in Bolivia. And I was there. I went to see. I know for a fact you live there. He's also in the Dominican Republic for a ministry called International Justice Mission. At IJM, he led efforts to combat sex trafficking of children. His work contributed to rescue of more than 110 victims and 21 convictions of perpetrators. Yeah. On September the 7th, 2017, President Donald Trump nominated Rodriguez to serve as a United States District Judge. On November of that year, a hearing was held on his nomination before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Then on January the 11th, 2018, his nomination was reported out of the committee by a voice vote. On June the 5th, 2018, Judge Rodriguez was confirmed by a 96-0. That's a good score. Vote of the full United States Senate. He received his judicial commission on June the 12th, 2018. He's here with his wife and two of his children, one of which has now become a resident of Dallas and a member of Trinity Church. Fernando and Terry have been married almost 30 years and have 4 children. Nicolas, wave your hand, Nicolas. Eliana, Mia, and Mirella, who's still in 16 now. Yeah. What I want to just say personally as I introduce him is that Fernando Rodriguez is a dear friend. And when he was here, and he and Terry were here in Dallas back in the early 2000s, they were elders at this church. They were also small group leaders and ministers, and just like many of you, I mean, they ministered at the altar. They had a life-changing small group. And I think Fernando was a member of a men's small group nearly the whole time he was here, in addition to all that. And so I thought it great, since they're moving Eliana into her new place, I thought it great for you to hear from Judge Rodriguez and give him a big Trinity Dallas welcome. I was preaching at their Uptown campus and not really thinking about anybody or anything, just preaching a message. And the Lord gave me a prophetic word that was very clear and just stopped me in my tracks. And the prophetic word, he said, ask Fernando to stand up and tell him that he's going to be a federal judge one day. Now, he was a law partner at Baker Botts. And at that time, I didn't even know what IJM, International Justice Mission, really even was. And so it was one of those moments, where you're just surprised that God say that, and then the only thing you could do is just awkwardly be obedient to it. And so that happened, and it wasn't too many years later, it was quite a few actually, I would, all along the way, I would remind him that I had that word. And just expecting him to do better and better at his law firm, and, he's going to be great. But what did he do? He joined a ministry and moved to Bolivia. And that's a moment where you really got to have faith in what you said. Because he was, adios, he was gone. And so... that was a moment where I just thought, Lord, did I miss it? And I felt like the Lord said to me, no, didn't miss it at all. But I thought I did. And so that's when I went down to do some rescue work down in Bolivia. Hey, let's talk about this one more time. Are you sure? And so, gosh, lo and behold, he did well, and so had an amazing stint with the International Justice Mission, and told you about what happened there. And when President Trump took office, you were the first or second person out of the
First group, among the first group,
Yeah.
right? He actually nominated 3 individuals fairly quickly who President Obama had nominated, but their nominations had not gone through during the final years of the Obama administration. But judges like David Counts and Wes Hendricks were nominated by President Obama initially. Karen showed her up in Dallas, here in Dallas. And then President Trump nominated them again, and so they went through really quick.
Yeah.
But then I was part of that first group of people he nominated, sort of for the first time.
You know, your story's a little like David. I mean, you were up there on the hill tending sheep, and when Samuel came along and got you down, but were you surprised by that? I mean, you weren't expecting that, were you?
Right. In January of 2017, the Senators Cornyn and Cruz issued an announcement that if anybody was interested in one of I think there were 11 vacancies in Texas at the time, that they should apply. So I had a friend reach out and said, if this is still of interest to you, and I had expressed an interest back in 08, 09, you may want to go ahead and apply and see what happens. All they can say is no at the end of the day. And so I applied, but I was surprised to actually begin the interview process because I had not been in a courtroom for about 7 years at the time. So it's a very non-traditional route to the bench, and to not even be in the country or the state at the time. So that was very surprising. I mean, it was at the end of the day sort of a God thing, and it's sort of how he made everything align correctly for it to work out.
Yeah, and that interview process is very thorough.
Correct, right? So the process is long, but the senators have a committee of about 25 different lawyers from across the state that do the initial interview of candidates. So you do the interview with about 25 people at the same time. Then they report to the senators that they want to move forward. You'll then interview with the senators if they want to go ahead and present your name to the White House for consideration. They present your name and information, and if the White House wants to consider you, you interview with the White House folks. And at that point, if the White House and the president ultimately is interested, that's when you become the nominee.
Yeah.
But then the confirmation process is a whole other part. It takes for me, it was relatively quick, but it was about a year and a half through the whole process.
And I had the honor to be a reference.
Yes.
Right, and the DOJ called me,
Yeah.
and it was a very interesting process and very cool, really. I remember talking to you on several different occasions. We pray together, talk together, and it was all a new experience. I mean, it's just.
As well
it's
for
not
me.
something you're really prepared for, right?
That's correct.
You just have to walk it out day at a time.
Correct, and it is encouraging as you're going through it, the other nominees that you're walking with, sort of you communicate with each other and support each other, so that's helpful, as well as people who have been before it, right before you, to sort of give you ideas on what's coming up or what to expect.
Yeah. And then finally the day arrived, the Senate takes up your nomination. Were you actually in the Senate when they did that? Or?
No, the actual vote, the final vote, because you don't really know when it's going to occur. Once the Senate Judiciary Committee reports you out favorably to the Senate, then it's just a question of typically your senators getting the floor time on the Senate for an actual vote. And they have so many hours that they have to allow for debate. So it is there's a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes some people have waited more than a year to get the time on the floor vote. For me, it was a few months, but from 1 week, I don't think it's going to happen next week. They're going to go in recess. So it's probably not for another 2 months. And then 2 days later, you're on the schedule for next Tuesday. Yeah. So it can change very quickly, and it's completely beyond your control. And so you're just sort of, you're working, you're doing where God has placed you, and you just wait to see what happens.
Yeah. And when you met with the Senate Judiciary Committee, they asked you the obligatory questions and...
Correct. So there's a Senate Judiciary Committee that I believe has about 15, 17 members, and they can ask you whatever they want. You submit quite a bit of information to them, all about your history. It varies quite a bit how many questions they ask you, depending upon your record of which senators have a desire to ask you questions, but pretty much most things are fair game. Certainly anything about your record, your past. I was very fortunate. I never had any real opposition to my nomination. Other nominees did, so they were grilled, so to speak, at the Senate Judiciary Committee. I had 2 questions. By the time there were 2 panels, I was on the second panel. By the time my panel came up, the first panel, they had a lot of questions. They were circuit court nominees, so they went through a rigorous questioning. By the time my time came, there were only about 2 senators left in the room. And so one of them, the chairman at the time, just sort of asked me a couple questions, about how has your work with IJM prepared you to take the federal bench, and another question that was similar, so sort of let's let him say something. So I answered the questions, I got to give my thanks, and then it was done. So I was very happy. Yeah. That's what you want. The fewer the questions, the better. So I made it through, and things worked out well.
It's sort of the same with your courtroom, right? The fewer number of questions you ask, the better off they are.
Most people probably do feel that way, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, then let's fast forward a little bit. So you now have a new job. How do you figure out how to be a federal judge? I mean, obviously it's not something. They don't have that class in law school, do they? I mean, right. How do you figure that out?
Right, there's a lot of, there is some training, but there's baby judges school, which is a week-long training, but some people...
Hang on just a minute, you call it baby judge?
Yes, but that can take place a month or 2 or 3 months after you're on the bench. Yeah. So there's quite a bit of on-the-job training, but you talk to your colleagues, in my courtroom, Judge Olvera is the other district court judge, but we have judges in McAllen, in Houston, in the Southern District of Texas, Laredo, Corpus. So everyone's very open to, sort of being willing to give you advice, their thoughts on how to handle different things. And then it's just a lot of preparation. I mean, the good thing is, at least at the federal court level, most of our decisions, the parties present their position, their arguments on paper. You read through it, you research, you understand the issues. We actually don't have that many hearings on those issues. Sometimes we do, but most of the decisions are what we would call on the papers. So that looks very much like what you do at a law firm, where you're understanding, just doing a lot of writing, a lot of researching, understanding the case law, the statutes, and then reaching a decision and preparing your written opinion on it. There is bench time, so that's probably the part where you really are asking for a lot of advice about how do I handle this, how do I handle that. But there are some resources, but really other judges are probably the best resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So your colleagues, the guys that you're working with.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. What was your biggest surprise, your caseload or your kind of cases you were looking at, or just in general, what was wow, I didn't expect that.
Right. I think a couple of things. I'm on one of the border courts. I'm in Brownsville. So we have border courts, Brownsville, McAllen, Laredo, Del Rio, all the way to California. So the docket on the border courts is dominated by the criminal cases, as you can imagine. And so it is illegal reentry, so people who have been previously deported, removed from the United States who re-enter illegally again. It's now a felony at that point, so that comes before judges, district court judges, and then a lot of smuggling cases. Trafficking of drugs and people are smuggled north into the United States, and then firearms and the proceeds from drug sales are smuggled south, and they're caught at the border. So with IJM, I had done work on human trafficking, but it was a little bit different. So it gave me some understanding of the principle, but the learning curve was very steep, and just to understand the law and the variety of cases that are coming before me was you know you're going to get into it, but the sheer variety and breadth does sort of take you by surprise. I think the other part, and again, you know it, it is a fairly solitary position. I don't have much interaction with the attorneys other than in informal hearings. We don't talk about cases outside of the hearings, so it's just me, my 2 law clerks, my judicial assistant. And so most of your work is by yourself, and so you know that going in, but to feel it, and I'm an introvert, so it was great. Best job I've ever had, but it's still, there's a weight there because you're making decisions that impact a lot of people. And so there's the gravity of what you're doing does sort of take you aback at times and make you really think about, make sure I get this right.
Has there been any dilemma for you regarding the border? In other words, your job, you don't make the laws, you don't enforce the laws, but you apply the laws.
Correct.
And so you've got these applicable laws on the books. And have you had any dilemmas with all that?
I'm not sure that I don't think I've had any form of moral dilemma, right? Mainly because I understand my role, and so that gives me a lot of freedom to understand as long as I fulfill my role, then I am accomplishing, fulfilling what I think God wants me to do in this position, all right? Apply the law to the facts. I think what has struck me, and many federal district court judges I think would agree, the sentencing is very difficult. And you have the 20-year-old who was talked into, was vulnerable, for whatever reason, decides to try to bring 10 kilograms of methamphetamine across the border, gets caught, is looking at a 10-year minimum. Absent some certain circumstances that allow you to sentence them below that. I mean, they have no idea that that's the type of penalty they're looking at, and to just to know, to see people in front of you whose lives you're about to impact when you dictate the sentence. It is a weight. The plus side is there's a lot of factors I can consider, and there's a specific statute that sort of delineates the many factors, and so that gives me a lot of leeway to take into consideration extenuating circumstances, the history and characteristics of the defendant, weigh it against the seriousness of the offense, the need to deter, the need to have a just punishment. So at the end of the day, I do have a lot of discretion, within certain parameters that the law sets. And so that does give me freedom, so that even when you have this tough case, do we really need, is the best just outcome to place the 20-year-old with no criminal history who gets caught up in this scheme in prison for 10 years or for 8 years or 6 years, or is there a better solution? The law allows you to consider a lot of factors to say maybe there's a better solution for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I know you already told us that generally you pray before you take the bench, before you consider things. Do you find yourself specifically praying for any of the parties that are sitting before you? Do you?
What I do sometimes is when in order to sentence somebody, which is a large part of what I do, because most people plead guilty, at the federal court level. And so we have very few trials on the criminal side. So I think at least in the Southern District of Texas, I think it's over 99% of individuals plead guilty. I read a packet that's prepared called the Pre-Sentence Investigation Report that gives me a lot of information about the crime that's been committed, criminal history, and then a breadth of information about their personal background. And I read it all before the hearing to be able to get a sense of the issues that are going to arise. Then at the hearing, I listen to the lawyers. I give the defendant the opportunity to, what we say, allocute, to say anything they want for me to consider. Mm-hmm. But as I'm reviewing the pre-sentence investigation report, I do find at times that there's something about this particular individual that will lead me to pray for them at that moment, because I see their personal history, I see their background, the family circumstances. So that's probably where I most likely will find myself praying for the individual, sort of putting aside, okay, we're going to do the sentence under the law, but just for the family that's impacted, if there are victims, praying for the victims, and just going sort of beyond just kind of the specific decision I have to make here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did y'all hear that? I mean, I have to go before federal. I want one that's going to pray for me, right? And that's a pretty amazing thing that really that you are doing that. I doubt that's the norm among your colleagues. Maybe it is, but I'm thrilled to hear that, because I think that's where the rubber meets the road for all of us is, do we separate our Christianity from Sunday to the week? No, it should be the same, right? And however you are on Sunday should be the way that you should approach your job on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I appreciate that about you, Fernando. That's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. Is it true? When I talked to you, I was very concerned about asking you questions that maybe would somehow compromise you, or I didn't want to do anything, not even come close. And you said, well, the only thing, just don't ask me who I'm voting for president.
Nothing about politics.
Yeah,
correct.
Nothing to do with politics. But I think my question to you is it true? I have two questions, two is it true questions. The first, is it true that most of the people that are caught and go to court are really the super low level people? So you're finding illiterate or poor, or someone who's been coerced, or someone who's like the 20-year-old who thought this is a good idea. Is it true that most of those who are engaged in criminal activity are at that level?
Yes, right. Certainly on the federal court level, which is my experience, and when we're talking about smuggling of drugs, smuggling of people into the United States, the majority of the individuals who are prosecuted are going to be the couriers, the mules, and it's the individuals because they have a way to enter the United States through the port of entry legitimately, so they're a U.S. citizen, or they may have authorization, some form of visa that allows them to get through the port of entry legitimately, but they use that to then smuggle drugs secreted at some point in the car or whatnot. The upper level management, sort of the true heads of the different cartels, don't come to the United States, and so it's very rare for them to be caught. There are occasions out in El Paso about 3 or 4 months ago. There was an arrest of 2 high-level individuals who, at this point, are alleged to have committed certain crimes, but who are allegedly high-level in the different cartel. But most of the time, you're looking at fairly low-level individuals. Sometimes you may have an individual who we would categorize under the laws that we apply as a manager, supervisor, leader, organizer. But even then, it's simply that they've recruited other individuals, so maybe they're not simply the courier, but they're overseeing a stash house. They're the ones who are managing 3 other people, and they're the mules. So they do receive certain enhancements to potentially receive a higher sentence. But they're nowhere near the top. It's relatively rare for there to be a prosecution of the upper echelon. They tend to stay in Mexico and the other countries.
Yeah. And I think if they're coming to federal court, are they citizens and non-citizens that you're seeing?
Correct.
Yeah, right. And for the most part, non-citizens?
On the drug side, it's a mix. I'm not sure if it's 50-50, but there's a mix because the cartels do target individuals who can cross legally into the United States, provide them with the vehicles that have the aftermarket compartments so they can hide the drugs in those places. And so they'll target them to try to recruit them. But then there are other individuals who will cross the border, cross the river with bundles of marijuana, or they'll use pontoons to float a truck over that's loaded with bundles, and then somebody drives that into the interior. And so they tend to be people who don't have U.S. citizenship or who are not authorized to enter the United States legally. So it is a mix. Probably, it's hard. I'm not sure what the mix would be, but there is a mix.
Yeah. And then my last question, and I'm going to invite some of you to ask questions. My last question really is this, is that when we look at the news, and again, it sort of depends on which station that you watch it on, but when we look at the news, we see what's happening at the border characterized as a real crisis. We see literally thousands of people lined up on the Mexico side, coming across, and we're led to believe that most of them are coming across illegally. And so I guess I'd just like to hear your perspective on the crisis at the border and how do we remedy that?
Right. So on that, I probably can't get into any adjectives or policy considerations.
I tried just a little.
Right. Probably what I would say, at my position, I have to adjudicate over whatever matters the Office of the United States Attorney chooses to prosecute. Yeah. And so they're the ones who are enforcing the law, the U.S. attorneys and the assistant U.S. attorneys in the different offices who are doing the investigation with law enforcement, and then they choose to, once they have the evidence that they believe indicates an individual has committed a crime, present it to a grand jury. If they can get an indictment, then it becomes a case in the court. All that's just what the U.S. attorneys do. The different administrations may have different criteria about what laws to prioritize. Obviously, they're charged with enforcing all the laws of the United States, but there are different priority levels that different administrations have implemented over the years. But I have no role in any of that. No judge does. And it's simply the decisions of the U.S. attorneys. Once it gets within our system, then at that point it's just another individual who's charged, and you go through the process, ensure that they receive due process, and either the trial if they don't plead guilty, and at that point the government has the burden to prove that they're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Until then, they're innocent until proven guilty. And if they either plead guilty or are found guilty by a jury, then I sentence them. Yeah. Right? But in terms of the numbers and how many people are being prosecuted and things of that nature, really that's all the enforcement side. And so we have no real involvement in that.
Yeah. I said I was finished, but I got one more. You and Terry moved down there and been to your home, beautiful home, and you live right next door to your pastor. Yes. Is that true?
He's the founding pastor of our church, but he passed the baton over to the next pastor, but he's still the founding pastor.
Okay.
Yes.
And you guys lead a small group in your home, or you're part of a small group?
We have led small groups in our home. Right now, about a month ago, the church that we attend relaunched our second campus. Yeah. We had a campus at a second location, but COVID sort of caused it to shut down. We have now relaunched it, so we are part of that relaunch. So we're kind of focusing on supporting that effort, and Terry's working with the children's ministry. I'm sort of coordinating the prayer ministry. So for at least for this season, that's where most of our time is.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I'm on the board of the church as well.
Awesome.
So,
And then this last thought is this. Do you ever have any concern about your security? I know you have a security detail. What's their role in your lives, and is it disruptive at all?
Okay, it's not disruptive. The United States Marshals are the entity and the individuals who are charged with the protection of the United States judges and the courtrooms. And so they do a very good job of sort of ensuring our safety. Every federal judge, when you take the bench, they come and do the inspection of your home and install the security system that they think is adequate. If there's ever a case that's sort of high profile or for some reason presents security concerns, they'll take steps to make sure that you're protected. So we've never felt any issues with security, but for example, every justice on the Supreme Court has a detail of marshals and deputy marshals, and they'll be outside the home if it's a time of sort of protest or just sort of individuals who are focused on being in front of one of the justices' homes. So they do a very good job, right? But we've never had any issues at this point.